Hey, everybody, this is Eric Mishi, Executive Director at SAVE, and I'm thrilled to be here today with John MacPhee, who is the CEO of the JED Foundation. JED Foundation is a great organization, works throughout the country, working with young people, and is also, we are thrilled to be a part of an organization called the National Council for Suicide Prevention that we're pleased to be able to partner with the JED Foundation in that space as well. John, good morning. Well, it's actually good afternoon here now in Minnesota.
Good morning. Good afternoon to you. Good morning to me. I'm in Park City, Utah.
It is morning there. Well, good for you. Are you skiing or what are you doing in Park City?
Well, a little bit of hiking. No skiing this time of year.
I guess I didn't know when the ski season is in Utah, but hiking season probably all year round. Well, John, great to have you. Thanks for making some time with us today. Maybe tell us a little bit about the JED Foundation and a little bit about you and how you are the CEO of this great organization.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the JED Foundation is a charity organization, a nonprofit that focuses on teen and young adult mental health and suicide prevention. We do a lot of work with schools, school districts, high schools, colleges, and universities, helping them assess all of their approaches, their programs, policies, and systems for mental health and suicide prevention. We help them identify things they can do to strengthen their mental health safety nets. We do other things too that we can talk about, but everything is focused on the mental well-being of 13 to 30-year-olds. And I have the good fortune to serve as the CEO, and I've been in the position now coming on 13 years.
And so I've had a chance to meet one of the co-founders, and it's a guy who's been in this field for a long time, Phil Satow. And obviously the backstory here of the JED Foundation is similar to a lot of backstories of nonprofits. There was a personal journey and a personal story that started with loss and then the desire to want to try to help others. We live in a time and an era when young people, and particularly that segment that you're focusing on, 13 to 30, are struggling with a lot of pressures and a lot of difficulties in the mental health space and from a lot of external factors that you and I, when we were younger, these were just simply a lot of these things we didn't have to deal with, right? Social media wasn't an issue back then. Bullying and those types of things. So as you look at the work that you're doing, and let's talk a little bit about kind of college campus work. Explain a little bit about the work that you do when you work with colleges and post-secondary institutions in terms of helping them help that population that they serve.
Sure. Well, so the idea is that a school, and really actually any organization, any what we call boundaried organization that has members, so this could be an employer, a faith community, a school, should have a plan, right? It should be part of their mission and their objectives to support the mental health and well-being of the people they serve. And there should be a plan for doing that. And the plan should take advantage of the great deal of knowledge we have about how to support mental health. And so that's what we help a college do, right? And so we have a program called JED Campus, in which the JED Foundation and a college partner for 4 years. And we survey, what we do is we help them form that team if it doesn't already exist. Students are a part of that team and engaged. And it's a multidisciplinary team that includes a lot of, different offices, if you will, faculty and staff, academics, building and facilities, res life, et cetera, because supporting student mental health belongs to everybody. We survey students so we can understand what's happening at the student level in terms of their experiences and their attitudes and behaviors towards mental health, but towards things like help seeking and help giving, but also what are the rates of depression and anxiety and flourishing, resilience at the campus. Then we look at first upstream, right? So upstream things like, so what's being done to develop life skills, problem solving skills, social emotional skills that we know help young people and young adults navigate life's challenges. What's being done to help create a sense of community, reduce isolation, promote connectedness and a sense of belonging? Then from a culture perspective, reducing stigma and promoting help seeking and help giving so that it's okay not to be okay, and you know where and how to get help. Then we help look at, what can you do to notice if a student is struggling? So are there systems for other students to report if they're worried about a peer? Um, how do you train faculty, staff, and students to respond and to notice if someone is struggling? But also, how do you think about absenteeism? How do you think about changes in grades? Are these opportunities to check in with a student, to put them with a counselor? That's the fourth domain. Then mental health services, right? So now a student. The student is either self-identified or they are you're worried about them. So how do you get them mental health care? What's being provided at the school? What can this, when and how is the school referring to providers in the community? What are the policies that wrap around all of this? So when do you engage family and caregivers? When is that appropriate? When might a student have to leave school? Under what circumstances? Is that understood and clear? When and how do you bring them back? And then the last three domains are to make sure that you're ready for a crisis if one happens. And then also that the environment is safe. So you mentioned bullying, cyberbullying, but also physically safe. So our rooftops secured, our bridges, safe, these kinds of things, because we know suicidal impulses can be fleeting and we want to make sure we're restricting access to lethal means. And lastly, all of this has to be looked at through an equity lens. Like, who's that school built for? Who's potentially marginalized in that school? And, it's the concept of targeted universalism, which is out of Berkeley, this idea, I believe it's out of Berkeley, which is, this idea that if you want a universal outcome, better mental health and lower risk of suicide, you have to have tailored approaches, to different populations of people in order to get that universal outcome. So all that wrapped together, we take all of this and we look at what the school is doing with the school, we partner with them, and we create a plan to implement ways they can strengthen what they're doing. And then JED supports them through advising and consulting. That's a long answer, but it's a pretty intensive, it's a pretty intensive program.
Yeah. So, there's nothing, it is a lot of work. You got to put a lot of planning, a lot of conversations. So as you look at the work that you've been doing in your role in the last 13 years, as it relates kind of to that population that you just talked about in terms of working with that, what's changed the most? What's become both more challenging in that space, maybe what's improved rather than what's gotten easier, but what's become more challenging?
Well, I'd say what's become more challenging, you referenced at the beginning. I think there are more stressors on young people today. There's a lot of anxiety around climate change, for example. We just went through COVID, and there's a lot of lingering effects still, and grief and loss associated with COVID. School shootings, polarization. This idea that are you going to be successful? Student loan debt. There's a lot of pressures and awareness of the pressures, and I would say that has amplified over the 13 years that I've been in this role. Young people are amazing, right? They want to take on the issues. They care deeply about the world, about each other, and they want to make it a better place. But they're dealing with a lot of stress and pressure. What's gotten easier is, I'd say, the stigma is reduced, and the reluctance to openly participate in these programs has changed dramatically. At the beginning, 2013, we literally had schools say, "We're going to work with you, but do you have to tell anybody? Like, don't tell anybody." And we don't want to be a school that students with mental health histories apply to in a disproportionate way. The schools literally told us that. And so at the very beginning of our JED campus program, we did not announce any schools until we had about 40 that we were working with, and we announced 40 together. Because of that, today schools issue press releases when they join our program. Like, it's just totally different.
Yeah. Well, and with all things related in this field is this notion of kind of reducing the stigma by simply talking about it, right? Leaning into it and not avoiding the conversation is a critical piece of it.
Yes.
In the last couple of months, there's been a new national strategy for suicide prevention that was released, which kind of becomes in many ways a tool for organizations like yours and ours and others to really find ways to continue to make an impact and work together and collaborate. As you went through and look at some of the recommendations, and you and I both had an opportunity actually to be at the White House when they unveiled that. What is it about that strategy that you feel is different this time around than the last one that was released a decade ago in helping to inform the work that you're doing?
Well, first, I'd say this idea about having a national strategy, I think, is critical. It's consistent with what we just talked about in terms of having a plan, right? At every level, we need a purposeful plan. And so this is a purposeful plan for us as a nation. And much of the work is around, the things that I talked about, which is how can we as communities and organizations support mental health, increase the protective factors like connectedness and belonging, and reduce the risk factors. I'd say that this update, to me, what's most important about this update is its focus on equity, throughout the plan, and really, tailoring approaches. We know that people who under financial stress are challenged potentially, with more so, and may have worse mental health outcomes. Right? We see that rates of suicide are growing faster in the Black community and among Black youth. LGBTQ youth have higher rates of suicide, as do indigenous people. So there are differences, really, really important differences in outcomes, in access to treatment, in terms of what are the additive stressors that different groups are experiencing, and the way that we need to think about supporting and helping them. And I would say, to me, the attention to that is the most important update in the national strategy for suicide prevention.
Okay. Yeah. It's this issue of equity in terms of the approach really is a critical component part of trying to address some of these issues. I know that you and I both have made comments on the most recent National Institute of Mental Health report, which shows really significant spikes in preteen suicidal ideation, and particularly with young girls and African American youth and Hispanic youth. And this idea of a one-size-fit-all approach just simply isn't going to work, won't work, and we know that it hasn't worked. And so it's encouraging, at kind of all levels of public policy, that we're taking this notion of equity and expanding it in many, many different ways. We got a question from someone who asked, in my own experience supporting local schools, I often find educators to be overwhelmed and intimidated by listening for and bringing information to identified staff instead of siloing information. Combine that with other times understaffing. What do you see as the best way to partner and find they feel supported?
Well, so, as I understand the question, it's a really important concept or issue that's being raised, which is that faculty and staff, also need a lot of support. And in fact, they've been through a really, really difficult period through COVID. And so it isn't just about the youth, it's also about how we support everybody in the school buildings. I think that's really, really important, the concept of caring for the caregiver, if you will. Now, that said, I think that this is about communication and really partnering, because we're not asking teachers to be counselors, right, and to be therapists, but they are the front line, and they are in a position where a student might actually express distress to them in some way, and they need to know how to recognize that. And I would argue that's part of their job, right? That is, and certainly it's the opportunity, and they should know how to have these conversations. But the idea is identify and refer, right? That's really, and to make sure that those systems are in place. But we also certainly have to have the supports in place for teachers and faculty and staff. And it's been a really, really hard run. And in mental health and this idea of supporting youth well-being, there are so many overlapping and intersecting, and intersecting issues that are have to be addressed and are contributing to this, and all the pressures that are on teachers and on our education system are one of them.
Yeah. That issue of kind of frontline folks, again, teachers, administrators, and things like that. Um, as you look at, again, the work that you're doing and how do you interface with them, is how do you, because one of the things that I think we see oftentimes as we talk to educators and folks like that is this resistance that we're adding something else to their plate, right? We're adding something else to their responsibility. And it isn't that they don't care about these, they clearly do, right? They're passionate about these issues because this is their life work.
Yes.
How do you help get that buy-in? How do you get the breakdown some of those barriers where there may be resistance that isn't about whether they think it's important, but more about I just simply don't have the bandwidth to do more.
Right. So one way I'd say is when we work with schools, and I go back to that concept of the team, you need to be inclusionary, right? So have the team, and you have teachers on the team, representatives on the team. I talked about colleges, but we also work with high schools. We also work with
Mhm.
school districts. And so that these issues are raised and discussed, what's possible, right? And so it's not being dictated, it's being sort of co-created, if you will, where everybody can sort of see their opportunity to help, but also can explain, like, what do they need? So it's and also our college program is 4 years long, because it takes time to get the buy-in, and and to sort of make these cultural changes and shifts. It can't happen overnight. It can't just be sort of dictated, from the top down. It's an evolution, if you will, right? And also, it's not just about schools. We do a lot of work with community-based organizations, but hopefully over time, it's also part of our society and how we all show up, right? So, Eric, you and I talked before this. We'll talk after this. We see each other all the time, right? But if you see me and you think I'm withdrawn or different or something's going on with me, right? You're going to say, "Hey," I think you'll say, you and I have not been in this situation before, but I think you'll say, "Hey, John, is everything all right? Anything I can do for you?" Or it's just, it's a societal thing. It's kind of like the Surgeon General says, it's a whole of society response, and schools are an important part of it, but by no means all of it. And it's really all of us that need to play a role in this.
So the Surgeon General, speaking of Surgeon General, has sounded this alarm for a long time. This concept of a kind of a crisis of loneliness, right? This notion that as connected as we may be as a society through social media and things like that, including Zoom calls and virtual things, that there's probably never been a time, at least in modern times, when we have felt more alone and more isolated. Um, as you think about that in the context of your work, in the context of the JED Foundation, how fundamental is that to trying to solve the issue and deal with suicide prevention?
I think it's quite fundamental, this idea of connectedness, and community and belongingness is very protective. And when we feel isolated and disconnected, that can be a significant risk factor. So I do think fostering belonging, connectedness, and I would add to it purpose as well. I think is really, really important, and where a lot of the issue and the solutions are, in our society. Society is changing fast. Technology is changing fast and advancing, and I think that's part of what we're all wrestling with, which is, the internet met the phone, and this is much bigger than social media. I mean, and I'm a strong believer that the social media companies need to be regulated, and we need to be very, very careful and prescriptive about what can and can't be done with children. They should not be commoditized and monetized by companies. I'm a strong believer in that. But this is much bigger than social media. We have changed the way people interact, the way they communicate. Dating for young people is completely different. How we spend our time face to face, how much time we spend outside, our sleep, a lot of things have changed. And this has created economic uncertainty and job uncertainty and upended industries. And, so I do think a big part of this is how we get back to our connectedness with one another, and in different formats and different ways, and build friendships and build connections and build sort of, community with each other. I think that this is absolutely fundamental to what we're talking about and what we both do in our roles.
Yeah. I'm the I'm the parent of a 23-year-old college graduate and a 21-year-old who's will be starting her senior year next Monday. And that concept of purpose, right, is I agree with you, John. I think is extraordinarily important. What's your purpose in what it is you do and who you are and how you define yourself, and the challenge these days of resiliency, and how do young people deal with kind of conflict, and how do they deal with the sense of failure and things like that. I think extraordinarily important, and it's a conversation that my wife and I have with our kids very often about making sure that they communicate when they're struggling, communicate with their friends and their social network, which is a decidedly different reality than when I was in college more years than I can seemingly recall ago. But and I think it's healthier. I think it's better. I think there's different challenges they face.
Yes.
So I'm going to shift a little bit. We are in the midst of a election cycle in this country, and I think we all appreciate robust debate and conversations amongst all of the candidates for public office, regardless of who you support or who you don't support. And the Jet Foundation has had, and I don't think this is a new thing. I think you've done this before, where it's talking to teen and young adults about how do they deal with election stress.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about what you do in that area.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we have an upcoming webinar about this, actually. And I should know exactly when it is and be able to.
We'll find out and we'll put it on here.
I think our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Laura Erickson-Schroth, is speaking about this shortly. Look, I think everything needs to be in balance. You need to take care of yourself, right? And so, making sure that you're taking good care of yourself, you're not consuming more media than is necessary. Being active, volunteering, being a part of the process can be helpful and protective. So certainly we recommend, looking at ways to do that. Stay connected to friends, et cetera. But just be careful. Take it all in moderation. The depending on what your beliefs are and what policies you believe in or not, it's a high stakes election. Because things might be quite different one way or the other, depending on who wins. And so, I would just say it's important to keep everything in balance, to keep a long view, take care of yourself. Don't do things like, drink or drug in response to the anxiety, but, get outside, be with friends, that kind of thing, and look for ways that you can participate in the process. That kind of activism is helpful, and advocacy is helpful.
Yeah, and I echo that, and I applaud you for having that conversation. I think I think there are too often times, and it's not just with elections. It's this idea of kind of sense of helplessness, right? That what can I do to impact this? What can I do to affect that? And it can be very frustrating. It can be very challenging. And again, depending on your perspectives and what you believe, you may either feel as though you're not being listened to, you're not being heard, or you may feel as though you're being targeted for whatever purpose and reason that may happen. And again, I kind of reflect back in, 30 years ago on college campuses, when you talked about politics and you got involved in political debate. There wasn't Twitter, there wasn't Instagram. Those conversations kind of happened in the moment, and when you were done, you kind of moved on. Now you have those conversations, and they just continue. They keep going and keep going. And so trying to figure out how do you empower young people to feel as though they've got some influence there seems to me to be very important.
Yeah, I think so, and keep things in balance. And no young people, they don't want to hear a message like this from me, a Gen Xer. But it's a marathon. It's a marathon, and things really do change. And what seems like a long time is shorter than you think it is. When you have the perspective, and you really can make a lot of change over time. It just it takes persistence and consistency, and so.
So we put up the webinar is this Thursday at 8:22.
Yeah, look at that. Perfect.
So anybody that wants to check that out, they can follow that link and be a part of that conversation. So as we're kind of coming to the end of our time together here, John, as you think about the subject matter field of suicide prevention, where do you see the biggest opportunities for individuals, the layperson, to make an impact, right? So again, giving them this sense that they themselves can make a difference, they themselves can help save a life. What would be some of those thoughts in terms of where you think those greatest opportunities exist?
So my feeling here is that this is one of the positives that came out of our collective experience with COVID, right? Everybody experienced, anxiety and uncertainty and mental health challenges, and and we all talked about it. And I think we have a better understanding today that it's a shared experience, and that most of us, we're all going to struggle at some time or another. So I think what we all can do is to now carry that vulnerability and that openness about this in our lives and in our households, and have open conversations with one another about it. If you're struggling, if you're worried about anybody else, lean into that feeling. Like, don't worry about the signs. Like, just, hey, is everything okay? I may be wrong, but I have a feeling that, you're struggling with something. Can I listen? Can I be here? Right. And I think if we can do that, that can make a really big change. And specifically around young people, there's clear data that caring adults, supportive adults, are very protective when it comes to teenagers and young adults, and in particular, non-parent caring adults. And so what I would say as a call to action is, if you have nieces, nephews, the children of friends, maybe you're a coach, what the teenagers, the young adults in your life, are you a caring, a supportive adult, right? And then the question is, does that teenager or young adult know it? Tell them explicitly. I'm here for you. If there's a problem, there's something going on with you or your friends, you don't know what to do and you don't know where to go, you come to me. I got your back. I will help you. I will be a partner in that. Which I think for many of us, we believe that that's the case, but let's, I would say, literally go and tell the young people your life. So what we're trying to do is create a safety net, right? Because we all need, at times, depending what's going on, a net to catch us, right? And so if we can figure out how we can be part of that net for others, and then it sort of grows and develops, I believe.
I think that's great advice. It's a great observation. John, thank you for the important work that you and the Jet Foundation continue to do. We're very proud to be in the same space working with you, and really grateful for everything that you do and for giving us some of your time here today.
Thanks so much, Eric. Thanks for inviting me on.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.